In this recording, we are going to look at the problem of the participle. What is a participle? It's a type of dependent clause, which just means it can't stand on its own, and its function is as an adjective. It's going to describe a noun. But it has one really particular job, and that is to describe the subject of the sentence. It won't describe any other noun, just the subject. So it can come in a couple different forms. Sometimes it's obviously an adjective, sometimes it isn't, and it can move all around the sentence. Here's where it usually is at the beginning, because then it's nice and clear as an adjective and as a dependent clause. As God's main servant, that is an adjective. It's also a dependent clause. This thing couldn't stand on its own, and its job is to describe the subject. The subject of the sentence is death, and that makes sense, because death is, in fact, the thing that is God's main servant. Here's the easier way form of it, where it's actually an adjective, envious, and it just has a couple other words that go with it. Envious of Beowulf's fame, that can't stand on its own. It's a dependent clause, and it's an adjective. Its job is to describe the subject of the sentence, and the subject of the sentence is Unferth, so that makes sense. Unferth is, in fact, the one who's envious of Beowulf's fame. This one is the form of the participle in the ing form of a verb, which is the one that's getting you guys in trouble a little bit. Here it's in the middle of the sentence, but doesn't really matter. It can go anywhere as long as it's doing its job, which is to describe the subject of the sentence. Feeling abandoned by every man is the whole participle, and it will describe the subject. The subject of the sentence is good deeds. And that makes sense, because good deeds is, in fact, the thing that's feeling abandoned by every man, and it's also the thing that offers help without being asked. So here's another form of our participle. So all of these are correct participles. They're adjective-dependent clauses. Their job is to describe the subject, and they do describe the subject here. That is, they make sense. The subject that the writer has chosen is, in fact, the thing that's described by the participle. When you choose the wrong subject, that is, you pick a noun for your subject that isn't the thing that's actually described by the participle, you have this particular kind of error, which is called a dangling participle. That means the participle is just sitting there, it's doing its job, it's trying to do the job of describing the subject, but you've picked the wrong subject. So here is our participle, again, that we had in the first example, as God's main servant, fine, and it's going to do its job, which is to describe the subject. Unfortunately, the writer has picked the wrong subject. The sentence that death delivers against every man is divinely inspired. Sentence is the subject of the sentence. The participle will describe that subject, but the writer's picked the wrong one. So now it doesn't make any sense. The sentence isn't God's main servant. Death is. So death has to be the subject of the sentence. Otherwise, you have a dangling participle. Same thing here. Here's our participle, envious of Beowulf's fame, right? But the subject of the sentence is story. And the participle says, what do you want from me? This is what I do. My job is to describe the subject. You just picked the wrong one. The story is not the thing that's envious of Beowulf's fame. The thing that's envious of Beowulf's fame is Unferth. Unferth must be the subject of the sentence. If it isn't, in both of these cases, the wrong noun is the subject. So you get a thing called a dangling participle. And that's not just a grammatical thing. In a simple sentence, maybe you could figure it out. But in a really complex sentence, it doesn't make any sense. So the writer's going to have to do a lot of work to figure out what you really did mean. So stop the recording for a second and read through these and see if you think they're dangling or correct, and then start it again and see if you got them right. Okay, so this one, here's our participle. It's at the beginning. Aware that he has misjudged the value of goods, that can't stand on its own, and it's an adjective. We can tell that because the first word is an adjective. And to decide if it's dangling or correct, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the subject of the sentence? Find the subject, and then ask yourself if that subject is in fact the thing that's aware he has misjudged the value of goods. The subject is entry. Not every man. It looks like it could be a little sneaky there, but you got to pay attention to that possessive adjective. This thing is an adjective. Here's our noun. Noun is entry. Is entry the thing that is aware that he's misjudged the value of goods? No. So number one is a dangling participle. The subject of the sentence has to be every man, because he's the one who's aware. In number two, here's our participle, believing he has no future at Camelot. Find your subject. Ask if that subject is the thing accurately described by believing. My subject is Lonval, and Lonval is the one who's believing he has no future, so number two is correct. Here's my participle here at the end of the sentence, suggesting a high level of critique of authority. My subject is Arthur. Arthur is not the thing that is suggesting the high level of critique. It's not that. It's the whole action, this act of Arthur giving no good reason for treating him unfairly. That's the thing that suggests the high level of critique, not Arthur. This sentence doesn't make any sense, and it's a dangling participle. Here we have our participle here in the middle, acting out of pure vengeance. Find your subject. That's queen. Then ask yourself, is the queen the one who's acting out of pure vengeance? Yes, she is. So number 4 is a correct participle. How do you correct it? If you've got a sentence that doesn't involve any commentary and you're just fixing the grammar, it's easy to fix a dangling participle. Just choose the correct subject. Just look at your sentence critically, find the subject, see if it matches the participle. So here was our incorrect one. Here's the participle. Aware that he has misjudged the value of goods. Dependent clause that's working as an adjective. Here's my subject. That doesn't make any sense. The entry isn't aware of anything. It has to be everyman. So I just rephrase this whole bottom part. Leave the participle as it is and just make everyman your subject and rephrase the sentence. Every man's entry into heaven depends on goods. Okay, just get that same idea and rephrase it with every man as your subject. Every man seeks out good deeds to complete his reckoning, or whatever. You can rephrase a sentence any way you want as long as the subject is correct. Or another way you can do it is to just rephrase and eliminate the participle altogether. Participles are nice. They give variety to your sentence, but they also can mess you up. So if you're not sure if you're doing the right participle subject match, just rephrase it. All right, here's our incorrect participle. Here's the subject, entry. That is not the thing that's aware. Doesn't match the participle. So we have a dangling participle. To fix it, you can just rephrase it. Just get rid of it and rephrase it any way you want. Once every man becomes aware that he's misjudged the value of goods, every man seeks out goods to complete his reckoning. Same basic idea. I just got rid of this participle of aware that he has misjudged it. I made it into a verb. And you can do that and you don't have any worries about a dangling participle at all. So when the dangling participle, where it really becomes a problem is when you're using it to introduce your commentary. Why is that a problem? First of all, it's probably dangling, and thus it doesn't make any grammatical sense. But the really important part is that it's an unacceptable shortcut to analysis. You're using those ing participles to stand in for about 4 or 5 sentences that would actually explain how that thing works. So if we look at this sentence, Lamval accepts the lady's demands to keep their affair secret, revealing the dangers of leaving the community. This is a pretty good participle down here, revealing the dangers of leaving the community. It's got a nice theme phrase here. It's got a nice verb, nice active verb, but it's dangling. Lamval is our subject. Okay. Lamval is not the one who's revealing the dangers of leaving the community. What is the thing that's actually doing the revealing? It's a bigger picture of the story. It's the acceptance of the demands, not Lamval himself. When you cram this ing participle onto the end of your sentence, not only do you get a grammatically incorrect sentence, but you get one that doesn't actually do any argument at all. So the ways that when you want to fix this, a sentence that involves commentary, it's a little more complex because now you're dealing with meaning and not just with grammar. One way to do it is to rephrase with a new subject and conjugate your verb. Get rid of the participle altogether. So here I've gone from Lamval being my subject, which doesn't make sense because Lamval is not the one who's doing the revealing, to Lamval's acceptance of the lady's demands to keep their affair secret reveals the danger of leaving the community. So I've changed my subject from the person to the thing that he does, and I've changed my participle to a nice conjugated verb. Same idea. That's what this sentence was going for, but because it was using the ing participle that was dangling, it shortcutted any kind of explanation. If you wrote that sentence, you'd feel like you were done when you got to the end. Well, I've made my argument, but you really haven't done anything. This sentence sets you up for more argument. Here's your claim to your reader. The acceptance reveals this thing, and your reader's going to say, how does it do that? The next couple sentences are going to explain how this thing reveals this stuff. This sentence fools you into thinking you've made an argument because of this ing thing, suggesting that you're making some kind of taking some kind of position. But you've just short-circuited any kind of development that you could get out of what is a really nice idea. Another way that you can fix it is to use this and or that or these or those, which are called demonstrative adjectives, plus a noun plus a conjugated verb. This is a really nice way to get your argument out there because it gives you a built-in transition. Lambo accepts the lady's demands to keep their affair secret. A nice little semicolon in there would suggest you're really not done with your idea yet. This kind of blind willingness to follow order reveals whatever it is you want it to reveal. So what am I doing here with this rephrasing here? This kind of blind willingness. This whole phrase here is a way for me to interpret this plot fact. The fact that Lambo's acceptance of the lady's demands is just a fact of the plot. But I want my reader to know something about that. How am I interpreting the fact that he accepts her demands? So I rephrase it with this lovely word, this, which is a word that points back to the sentence before it. And then I rename this fact. Plain old fact of the text, but here's my interpretation of it. It's a kind of blind willingness. And then I'm going to tell my reader what I want them to know about that. That kind of blind willingness to do this sort of thing reveals whatever it is I want him to, whatever I want to argue that it reveals. There's no right way to correct a participle. Even if it's not dangling, even if it's a correct participle, is it messing up your commentary, though? Is it really getting you somewhere with commentary? There isn't one right fix. So you have to become aware as the writer of your real goal, which is to clarify your argument with as much development as it needs. One little ing participle stuck onto the end of a sentence is not going to clarify that. So don't rely on that shortcutting method. If for right now, maybe eliminate all the participles. Don't write with any ing participles and use one of the corrections that we saw earlier where you're rephrasing with conjugated verbs. That way you won't fall into the trap of making a dangling participle, and you'll actually give yourself more room to create your argument.